Hello everyone, this is Mr. Laubach. Today we are going to take a look at John Quincy Adams, the sixth president of the United States. Adams is often overshadowed by other presidents, but his contributions to America, both during and outside of his presidency, make him one of the most fascinating figures in U.S. history. So let's talk about his time in office and his time out of office. Now, of course, John Quincy Adams was the son of John Adams, the second president of the United States and founding father. So let's start with the election of 1824. It was one of the most contentious in U.S. history, often called the corrupt bargain by opponents of John Quincy Adams. Four candidates, Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams, William Crawford, and Henry Clay, vied for the presidency, but none of them secured a majority of the Electoral College votes, sending the decision to the House of Representatives. Despite Jackson winning most popular and electoral votes, the House chose Adams as president, allegedly due to a deal between Adams and Clay. Henry Clay became Adams' Secretary of State, the stepping stone to the presidency in that time. This is what was referred to by Andrew Jackson's followers as the corrupt bargain. This outcome enraged Jackson's supporters, fueling deep political divisions and setting the stage for the rise of Jacksonian Democrats. So just a quick overview of the Adams presidency. John Quincy Adams served as president from 1825 to 1829. He was a one-termer. When he was president, was a Democratic Republican. Earlier in his political career, he was a Federalist. And after he was president, he became part of the Whig Party. His tenure was marked by ambition. He had bold ideas for national infrastructure, education, and science. But there was also a lot of opposition. His vision of an interconnected and educated nation was ahead of its time, but political partisanship blocked most of his proposals. Interestingly, Adams' foreign policy accomplishments before and during his presidency showcase his true legacy as one of the great diplomatic minds in U.S. history. So, foreign policy during his presidency. While domestic challenges often overshadowed his agenda, he still pursued notable foreign policy goals. One of his key initiatives was the Pan-American diplomacy. Adams supported cooperation with newly independent nations in Latin America. He believed that closer ties with these countries could foster trade and mutual defense. Opposition at home, particularly from Southern leaders concerned about alliances with nations that had abolished slavery, blunted the potential of this effort. Adams also worked to expand trade through reciprocal agreements and sought to open the British West Indies for American ships. While his efforts faced setbacks during his term, they laid the groundwork for future trade successes. Now let's talk about Adams' diplomatic legacy from when before he was president. To truly understand Adams' brilliance in foreign policy, we need to rewind to his time as Secretary of State under President James Monroe during the era of good feelings, from 1817 to 1825. Here, Adams shined as a master diplomat. First up, we have the Adams-Onís Treaty of 1819. This was a landmark achievement. Adams negotiated with Spain to secure Florida for the U.S., while also establishing a clear boundary between the U.S. and Spanish territories in the western part of North America. Then there's the Convention of 1818. Adams skillfully resolved border disputes with Great Britain, securing joint occupation of the Oregon Territory and establishing the U.S. Canada border along the 49th parallel. These peaceful settlements reinforced his belief that diplomacy, not conflict, was the key path forward. Of course, we can't forget Adams' role in crafting the Monroe Doctrine. This 1823 policy declared that the Americas were off limits to future European colonization and interference, and that in return, the United States would stay out of European affairs. Although Monroe gave the address, the doctrine itself was largely Adams' brainchild. It laid the foundation for American dominance in the Western Hemisphere and influenced U.S. foreign policy for generations. Now, the election of 1828, time for John Adams to run for president again. It was a pivotal moment in American political history, marking the rise of populist politics and the start of the Jacksonian era. It was a rematch between John Quincy Adams, the incumbent president, and Andrew Jackson, who had narrowly lost to Adams in the controversial 1824 election. Remember the quote, corrupt bargain. The campaign was one of the dirtiest in U.S. history, filled with personal attacks, mudslinging, and accusations from both sides. Jackson's supporter painted Adams as an elitist out of touch with ordinary Americans, while Adams' backers labeled Jackson unfit for office, highlighting his temper and past controversies. Ultimately, Jackson's appeal to the common man and his ability to harness the expanding electorate led to a decisive victory. His triumph reflected a shift in power from the Eastern elite to the burgeoning frontier and rural populations, signaling a new era in American democracy. So let's talk a little bit about beyond his presidency. A lifelong fight for principles. Even after leaving the presidency, Adams didn't retire quietly. He went on to serve in the U.S. House of Reps for nearly 2 decades, becoming a fierce advocate against slavery. Known as Old Man Eloquent, he was instrumental in the fight to end the gag rule, which had prohibited discussion of slavery in Congress. But what stands out most about Adams is the consistency of his principles. Whether as a diplomat, a president, or a congressman, he believed in the power of ideas, the rule of law, and the role of the U.S. as a force for progress. So finishing up here, John Quincy Adams may not have been the most successful president in terms of passing legislation, but his vision and achievements as a diplomat left a long-lasting impact on the U.S. and its role in the world. Thanks for joining me in this video. I hope you learned more about John Quincy Adams. Have a great rest of the day.